What would you do if the billionaire CEO of a $20 billion corporation discovered that the quiet cafe worker he had ignored for years secretly controlled the company that made him rich? Would she destroy his career? Would she expose hidden corporate secrets? Or would she uncover a betrayal so dangerous that it threatened to destroy everything he had spent his life building? Today's story contains billionaire secrets, hidden fortunes, shocking boardroom drama, corporate betrayal, and a powerful lesson every CEO needs to hear. Stay until the end because the final decision will completely change the future of Titan Innovations. And if you enjoy stories about billionaire CEOs, hidden fortunes, corporate scandals, and shocking business secrets, subscribe to Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs. Because behind every powerful CEO, there is always a secret waiting to be revealed. Chapter 1: The Man Who Had Everything. Alexander King believed he was unstoppable. At 42 years old, he was one of the youngest billionaire CEOs in America. His company, Titan Innovations, dominated the technology industry. Private jets, luxury homes, magazine covers. He had everything money could buy. But success had changed him. Employees admired his intelligence but feared his temper. Investors praised his results but avoided disagreeing with him. Inside Titan Innovations, people rarely challenged Alexander. He had become used to getting his way. Every morning before work, Alexander visited the same small cafe across from company headquarters. The cafe was simple. Nothing special. But it was convenient. For nearly 5 years, the same woman served him coffee. Her name was Emma Lawson. She appeared to be an ordinary cafe worker in her 60s. Quiet. Polite. Invisible. At least that's what Alexander thought. One rainy morning, after a disastrous investor call, Alexander entered the cafe in a terrible mood. As Emma handed him his coffee, a customer accidentally bumped her arm. A few drops landed on Alexander's expensive suit. The entire cafe became silent. Emma immediately apologized. "I'm very sorry." Alexander looked down at his suit. Then he laughed coldly. "Do you have any idea how much this costs?" Emma remained calm. "It was an accident." But Alexander wasn't finished. "Maybe you're too old to be doing this job." Several customers looked uncomfortable. Emma simply smiled. A calm, confident smile. Then she said something strange. "Sometimes the most valuable people are the ones nobody notices." Alexander shook his head and walked away. To him, she was just a cafe worker. Nothing more. What he didn't know was that within 72 hours, he would discover that Emma Lawson controlled a secret capable of changing his life forever. 2 days later, Alexander arrived at Titan Innovations expecting an ordinary morning. Instead, he found chaos. Executives hurried through the hallways. Assistants whispered nervously. Board members who rarely visited headquarters were suddenly arriving one after another. Something was happening. And nobody seemed willing to explain it. As Alexander stepped into the executive elevator, his assistant rushed toward him. "Sir, there's an emergency board meeting at 10. Alexander frowned. "What's it about?" She hesitated. "I honestly don't know." That answer irritated him. People usually told him everything. Today, nobody seemed to know anything. Or perhaps they were hiding it. Throughout the morning, rumors spread across the company. Some employees believed a major investor was planning a takeover. Others thought the company was facing a lawsuit. A few feared the business was in serious financial trouble. By 10 o'clock, the boardroom was packed. Investors sat quietly. Senior executives looked nervous. Even the chairman appeared unusually tense. Alexander took his seat at the head of the table. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" Nobody answered immediately. Finally, the chairman stood. "This morning, we received instructions from the controlling shareholder." The room became silent. Alexander's eyebrows tightened. Titan Innovations had always been surrounded by one mystery. Nobody knew the true identity of the controlling shareholder. For decades, ownership had been hidden behind trusts and private holdings. Most people assumed the owner was retired or dead. Yet somehow, that person still controlled the majority voting shares. Alexander leaned forward. "You're saying the owner contacted us?" The chairman nodded. "Not exactly." "Then what?" A small smile appeared on the chairman's face. "The owner is already here." Confused whispers spread around the room. Before anyone could speak, the boardroom doors slowly opened. Everyone turned. Alexander's confidence instantly disappeared. Walking into the room was Emma Lawson, the cafe worker. The woman he had insulted 2 days earlier. The same woman he believed was insignificant. The room erupted with shock. But as Emma calmly entered and took her seat at the center of the table, Alexander realized something terrifying. The biggest surprise was still coming. Because every board member in the room had just stood up to greet her. And they were treating her like the most powerful person in the company. The boardroom remained completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Alexander King stared at Emma Lawson as she calmly sat at the center of the table. This had to be a mistake. A cafe worker couldn't possibly belong in a meeting like this. Yet every board member looked at her with respect. Even the chairman seemed nervous. Finally, the chairman cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, today is a historic day." The room listened carefully. For the first time in 25 years, the controlling shareholder of Titan Innovations has chosen to appear publicly. Alexander felt his stomach tighten. The chairman turned toward Emma. "It is my honor to introduce Ms. Emma Lawson." He paused. "Owner of 53% of Titan Innovations." The room erupted with whispers. Several executives nearly fell out of their chairs. Investors exchanged stunned looks. Alexander couldn't believe what he was hearing. 53%? That meant Emma wasn't just a shareholder. She owned the company. She had more power than the board. More power than the investors. And more power than the CEO himself. Emma folded her hands calmly. For a moment, she simply observed the room. Then her eyes settled on Alexander. "You seem surprised." Alexander struggled to find words. "You work in a cafe." Emma smiled. That was the idea. The room became silent again. Emma explained that years earlier, she and her late husband had invested in a struggling technology startup. That startup eventually became Titan Innovations. After her husband's death, ownership passed to her. Instead of living publicly as a billionaire, she chose to remain hidden. For years, she worked in the cafe across from headquarters. Watching. Listening. Learning. She wanted to understand what the company had become. And what she discovered worried her. Very worried. Emma reached into a leather briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table. Immediately, several executives became nervous. The folder looked important. Dangerously important. Inside were financial reports, emails, investigation records, and confidential documents. Emma opened the folder slowly. Then she spoke. "The reason I called this meeting is not because of Alexander." She paused. "It's because someone inside Titan Innovations has been stealing from this company for years." The room froze. Every executive looked around nervously. Every investor sat forward. Alexander's heart began racing. A thief? Inside Titan Innovations? Emma closed the folder. Then she looked around the room. "I already know who it is." And suddenly everyone realized that the biggest secret of all was about to be exposed. The boardroom was so quiet that nobody could hear anything except the hum of the air conditioner. Emma Lawson kept the folder in front of her. Every executive stared at it. Every investor wondered the same thing. Who was stealing from Titan Innovations? Alexander crossed his arms. "Who are you talking about?" he asked. Emma looked directly at him. "For the last 6 years, someone inside this company has been leaking confidential information to competitors." The room immediately became tense. Several investors exchanged worried glances. Emma continued. "Product designs disappeared before launch. Major contracts collapsed without explanation. Business strategies somehow reached rival companies." The board members looked shocked. Many of them had blamed bad luck. Others blamed market competition. But Emma was revealing something much darker. Someone had been sabotaging Titan innovations from the inside. And making millions while doing it. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Do you have proof?" Emma nodded calmly. "I never accuse anyone without proof." She opened the folder. Inside were emails, financial statements, private messages, secret meeting records. The evidence covered the entire conference table. One executive immediately looked uncomfortable. Another lowered his eyes. The atmosphere grew heavier with every document revealed. Emma pressed a button on a remote. A large screen behind her came to life. Bank transfers appeared. Millions of dollars had been routed through hidden accounts. Then came photographs. Private meetings with executives from rival companies. The room fell silent. The evidence was overwhelming. Emma slowly looked around the table. The person responsible is sitting in this room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Several executives avoided eye contact. Then Emma's gaze stopped on one man. Richard Hale, Titan Innovation's Chief Operating Officer. For years, Richard had been Alexander's closest advisor, his most trusted executive. And now sweat was forming on his forehead. Emma noticed. So did everyone else. Richard forced a smile. "You can't seriously believe this." Emma calmly closed the folder. "Oh, I don't believe it." She paused. "I can prove it." The room exploded with whispers. Richard's face turned pale. Because deep down, he knew the truth. His secret was finally catching up with him. And in just a few minutes, his entire career would come crashing down. If this story has you hooked, make sure you subscribe to Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs. Because the next chapter contains the shocking betrayal that changes everything. And trust me, the truth about Richard Hale is far worse than anyone in that boardroom could imagine. The tension inside the boardroom was unbearable. Every eye was fixed on Richard Hale. For years, he had been one of the most respected executives at Titan Innovations. Now he looked like a man trapped with nowhere to run. Richard forced a nervous laugh. "This is ridiculous." But nobody laughed with him. Emma Lawson calmly stood from her chair. Then she pressed another button on the remote. The large screen changed. A private email appeared. Then another. And another. Each one connected Richard to executives from competing companies. The room became silent. Richard's confidence began to disappear. Emma continued. Next came bank records. Millions of dollars had been transferred through offshore accounts. Accounts secretly linked to Richard. Gasps filled the boardroom. Several investors looked furious. Board members stared in disbelief. Alexander couldn't believe what he was seeing. Richard had worked beside him for nearly 10 years. They had celebrated victories together. Made major decisions together. Built the company together. Or so Alexander thought. Emma displayed one final piece of evidence. A recorded video from a private meeting. Richard appeared on the screen shaking hands with executives from a rival company. Then his voice echoed through the room. "I'll make sure Titan never sees this product launch." The room froze. There was no denying it anymore. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard's face turned pale. Finally, he lowered his head. And confessed. Yes. The room erupted. Investors began shouting. Board members demanded answers. Alexander stared at him. Why? Richard looked up slowly. Years of jealousy burned in his eyes. Because I was tired of making you look successful. The room fell silent again. Richard wasn't motivated by money alone. He wanted power, recognition, control. And when he couldn't get it, he decided to destroy the company from within. Emma shook her head. You didn't betray Alexander. She paused. You betrayed every employee who trusted this company with their future. Those words hit harder than anything else. Within minutes, the board voted unanimously. Richard Hale was terminated immediately. Security entered the room. As he was escorted out, he looked back at Alexander one final time. But Alexander said nothing. The betrayal hurt too much. The doors closed. Richard was gone. His career was over. Yet Emma's expression remained serious. Because the biggest decision of the day still hadn't been made. The future of Alexander King. The billionaire CEO who had lost sight of what leadership truly meant. Would Emma remove him? Or would she give him something far more valuable? A second chance. After Richard was escorted from the boardroom, silence returned. The traitor was gone. The secret had been exposed. But one question remained. What would happen to Alexander King? Several board members immediately spoke. The company needs new leadership. He created a culture where people were afraid to speak. He ignored warning signs for years. Many investors agreed. The criticism was harsh. But it was true. Alexander sat quietly. For the first time in his career, he wasn't defending himself. He wasn't making excuses. Deep down, he knew he had failed. For years, he focused on profits, growth, and market dominance. He celebrated numbers. He ignored people. And while he was busy chasing success, Richard had quietly betrayed the company. Emma Lawson stood and walked toward the giant windows overlooking the city. The room waited for her decision. Finally, she turned around. Alexander. The CEO looked up. When I spilled coffee on your suit, what did you see? The question surprised everyone. Alexander lowered his eyes. A careless café worker. Emma nodded. And what should you have seen? The room became silent. After a long pause, Alexander answered. A human being. Emma smiled gently. For the first time since entering the boardroom, there was kindness in her expression. Exactly. Several investors exchanged confused looks. Then Emma said something nobody expected. I'm not removing you as CEO. Gasps echoed throughout the room. Even Alexander looked shocked. Emma raised her hand. But not because you deserve it. The room became quiet again. She continued. Leadership isn't about never making mistakes. She paused. It's about learning from them. Alexander felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Humility. Emma pointed toward the employees working in nearby offices. Those people helped build this company. She said softly. You forgot that. Alexander looked through the glass walls. For years he had seen employees as numbers on reports. Now he saw people. People with families. Dreams. Responsibilities. People who trusted leaders to do the right thing. And he had let them down. This is your final chance, Emma said. Not to save your job. She paused. To become the leader you were meant to be. For the first time in a very long time, Alexander wasn't thinking about money. He wasn't thinking about power. He was thinking about responsibility. And he knew that earning back trust would be the hardest challenge of his life. But he was determined to try. The weeks following the boardroom meeting felt completely different. For the first time in years, Alexander King stopped acting like the most important person in Titan Innovations. Instead of spending all day in executive meetings, he began walking through departments. He visited customer service teams, engineering offices, marketing departments, and manufacturing facilities. But this time, he wasn't there to give orders. He was there to listen. At first, employees didn't trust him. Many believed it was just another corporate performance, a temporary act to impress investors and the board. They expected the old Alexander to return, the arrogant billionaire, the CEO who thought profits mattered more than people. But something had changed. One morning, Alexander entered a conference room filled with junior employees. The room immediately became quiet. People were nervous. Then Alexander asked a simple question. What's the biggest problem inside this company? Nobody answered. The silence lasted almost a minute. Finally, a young employee raised her hand. We're afraid to speak honestly. The words hit Alexander hard. Months earlier, he would have become angry. Now he simply nodded and wrote them down. Over the next few months, similar conversations happened throughout the company. Every department shared the same concerns. People felt ignored. Ideas went unheard. Managers focused on results but neglected people. The culture had become driven by fear. Alexander realized Emma had been right. A company could make billions of dollars and still be broken. Determined to fix things, he introduced major changes. Anonymous employee feedback programs, leadership training, open forums where employees could speak directly to executives. For the first time, workers felt heard. Slowly, trust began returning. Then one afternoon, Alexander walked into the same café where he had insulted Emma. He stood in the exact spot where he had mocked her months earlier. The memory still embarrassed him. And suddenly he understood something. His biggest mistake wasn't insulting a café worker. It was believing someone's job determined their worth. That lesson changed everything. Months later, Titan Innovations achieved record profits. But this time, employees celebrated too, because they finally felt like part of the company's success. Then one evening, Alexander received a short message from Emma. Just 4 words. Meet me tomorrow morning. Alexander smiled. He knew the meeting was important. What he didn't know was that Emma was about to give him one final lesson. A lesson he would never forget. The next morning, Alexander arrived at Titan Innovations before sunrise. The building was quiet. Most employees had not yet arrived. Emma Lawson was waiting for him in a conference room overlooking the city. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. They simply looked through the glass windows at the skyline. Finally, Emma broke the silence. You've changed. Alexander smiled. I had a good teacher. Emma laughed softly. Then she placed a small envelope on the table. What is it? Alexander asked. A reminder. Alexander carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The words were simple, but they carried more wisdom than any business book he had ever read. Money creates success. Power creates influence. Character creates legacy. Alexander read the note twice, then a third time. When he looked up, Emma was smiling. I spent 25 years protecting this company, she said. But the most valuable thing in Titan Innovations was never the technology. Alexander listened carefully. It was the people. The word stayed with him. A week later, Emma officially retired. There were no press conferences, no television interviews, no grand celebrations. She quietly stepped away from the company she had helped build. But her influence remained everywhere. Years passed. Under Alexander's leadership, Titan Innovations became stronger than ever. Profits increased. Innovation flourished. Employee satisfaction reached record levels. And for the first time, the company became known not only for its products, but for how it treated people. The note Emma gave Alexander was framed and placed in his office. Every new executive was required to read it. Every manager was taught its lesson. Because one woman disguised as a cafe worker had revealed a truth many powerful CEOs never learn. The greatest leaders do not build empires. They build people. And when people succeed, companies succeed. Alexander never forgot the day he insulted Emma. What once felt like a small moment of arrogance became the most important lesson of his life. Because the woman he believed was ordinary turned out to be extraordinary. And her lesson became her legacy. A legacy that would continue long after she was gone. Final message. Many people spend their lives chasing money. Others spend their lives chasing power. But the people who leave the greatest impact understand something different. Money can buy comfort. Power can create influence. But character creates legacy. Never judge someone by their job. Never underestimate someone because of their appearance. And never forget that true leadership begins with respect. Final subscribe CTA. If this story inspired you, shocked you, or taught you something valuable, then you're exactly the kind of viewer this channel was created for. Subscribe to Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs for more stories about billionaire CEOs, hidden fortunes, corporate scandals, boardroom betrayals, shocking business secrets, leadership lessons, success and redemption. Every week, we uncover the secrets hidden behind wealth, power, and success. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the Dark Secret of Powerful CEOs family. And remember, behind every powerful CEO, there is always a secret waiting to be revealed.